Hello and welcome to Deep In Pact, a proud member of the Doof Network, where I dive deep into Arbo's most Canadian work 5 years on. And I'm Ruben Morehouse, and so Blake has gathered his friends to convince him why he shouldn't have the hyena as his implement, which is something that I've been saying for ages by myself, as I always do this podcast. And so it's fun. It's like the Cabal's around and they're, just kind of hanging out. Man, I feel like I'm off this episode for some reason.
Ruben, it's me. I'm back.
Blake who? Well, we didn't plan this bit out very well, but we decided to pull a Blake and just improv it.
Yeah, we tried to wing it. That's a joke, nice. Everyone.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
I like it. So let's jump behind the scenes a little bit. We're going to get a little bit of Deep In Pact behind the scenes here for you guys. We do our episode scripts, and every episode I make a new script which is a Google Doc, and since I need to have something in it so I can tell that it's actually there and not just like a blank doc, I've copied and pasted the exact same sentence into every doc, which is, in this chapter, Blake dies. And I've just been waiting for this very episode for this stupid joke to finally pay off. And it finally has, and I'm so happy.
Yeah, because this is exactly, just writing that in every doc is exactly the kind of stupid joke I would expect you to just make, anyway, so I never thought anything of it, and then I loaded up the script to make the script for 7-Eleven and saw this was still at the top, and I was like, oh, bloody hell, he's been doing this on purpose.
Yeah, it was all pre-planned. So obviously we'll talk about that a bit later, but let's get through the rest of the chapter first. This is a hard chapter to talk about because, obviously stuff happens before the end.
But it's really hard not to jump ahead and just...
Yeah, exactly. As I said, Blake has kind of gathered everybody to basically be his sense check, just shitting on the idea of having the hyena as his familiar for him, I guess.
Yeah, more or less. There's sort of a preamble Blake has just in his head before really getting this going, and he's just sort of talking to himself, I guess, about this war he has within himself, because he's not really like an introvert, or he doesn't always, want to be introverted. He wants to be around people. He's a very social person, but also his past makes that really difficult because he also hates being around people now. So he's kind of there's almost this nature versus nurture war going on within him that he sort of brings up here, and it just made me realize that that's true for other parts of his life as well. His new career is sort of his nature and his nurture fighting. I really like it.
He doesn't even get paid to be a practitioner. It's the worst career choice. But yeah, you're right. This is a theme that kind of represents itself throughout Blake a lot. He's kind of a conflicted person in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I like that this is something that Blake usually does, is he's very open to soliciting advice from people and soliciting feedback, but then he never takes it. So he's gathered the Cabal here to basically explain to him why he shouldn't have the hyena. And luckily this time he seems to actually accept their feedback, which rarely happens, honestly. Or maybe that's just because it's always Rose.
I was about to say, this is Alexis's feedback and Ty's to an extent. Yeah. So you could read that aspect into it for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is just me. I was getting Ty in this whole conversation was giving me big sibling vibes, and then Alexis was giving off mum vibes to me. This is probably saying more about my family than the story, I guess. But this whole dynamic where Ty kept making sarcastic comments, and then actually gave the real critique, and Alexis was just sort of being encouraging him and trying to get him to sort of figure it out for himself and asking what he thinks. It was just, I don't know. They really
supportive.
they felt like a bit of a family unit here. You could really see that close connection all of them share. Tiffany doesn't really say much of anything. She's just sort of there, I guess.
They do have this, and we kind of talked about this last chapter when we were getting to explore the Cabal a bit more, but they do have this actual kind of sense of closeness that really sells scenes like this.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically, Blake, if you want to know why the hyena is a bad idea, we talked about it 4 chapters ago, so just kind of enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, I get that you're not going to listen to Rose, but you should listen to us, Blake. I mean, we made a very good case, and we're only 5 years late.
Do we shit on Blake more than Rose or less, do you think, on the whole Elliot?
Well, is that countered by the fact that we also kind of shit on Rose as well?
Yeah, it balances out. You're right. Yeah, so Blake's Cabal make a few points as to why he shouldn't have picked the hyena, some of which we made, a few chapters ago, and he seems to come around. And it's basically at the point that he agrees with them that Rose jumps in, being like, hold on a second.
Yeah, in fact, I love the way she's introduced to the conversation. Alexis asks Blake, do you want to compromise? And Rose just immediately answers yes before Blake can. And it's sort of like, it's been a very, as I said, like it was a very supportive, close, tight-knit conversation till now. And it was like the second I read yes, Rose said before I could answer, I was like, oh, here we go. Like,
yeah.
This was all very, very like positive until now.
In Blake's defense, he kind of is very amicable towards Rose about all this stuff. Alexis is kind of like, that seems like a dick move, and Blake's like, no, she's right, let's hear her out. He's very nice to her about it.
I mean, that said, the language surrounding all the descriptions of Rose throughout this whole section, it's always, Rose butted in, or Rose retorted, or Rose shot a glare. Like, and this is like Blake's internal narration, so there's very much, he does say things that seem fair, but then also, like, there's definitely, I would not say these two are on the same page based on the language that he surrounds every description of what she does in his head.
Yeah, that's fair. I think they always are kind of, even when they're agreeing, it feels like they're kind of regretfully agreeing with each other, which is fun. So basically Rose is keen on the idea of the hyena as them. I mean, not necessarily the hyena, but she really thinks Blake should get an implement, and she's kind of on board with just picking this one because you need to get one of them.
I must just think, like, basically one of the big pros that's thrown around about the hyena is that it would probably be pretty powerful. And so I think Rose is just on team, get Blake some power so I can get out of the mirror. Because that is what she's seeing as her main way to get out of the mirror. Turns out there's other ways.
We'll see later.
But yeah, I definitely just got the impression she just wants Blake to pick a powerful implement sooner rather than later because she's sick of being in the mirrors, which is a very understandable viewpoint, really.
Yes, it is. It kind of does feel like she's... it kind of reminds me of back in the... When Blake first went into the police station, I think it was, somewhere around that arc, there was this scene where they were going in and Rose was like, let's slow roll this, let's, take it carefully. And Blake was like, no, let's do it, we'll figure it out. And this feels like they've kind of switched positions on that when Blake's like, let's take our time. And Rose is like, no, fuck it, let's get the power, it'll be fine. Which kind of makes me feel like they just like being on opposite sides.
Yeah, they really are two sides of the same coin, these two. There's just one other bit I quickly wanted to call out, is there's a little bit where Blake says, we're going to do our best to avoid dying, which, I mean, I guess it's a moot point now, but I reckon you could call him out for being forsworn on that, because... Look, we'll get into it, but this whole situation was pretty avoidable if he just not.
Oh yeah, totally. Like, we'll do our best to avoid dying, except we have to fight the dangerous monster. Like,
exactly.
Those two statements go next to each other. So Rose says something here that I want to call out, where Rose spoke quiet. It'd be nice if we weren't waiting for all hell to break loose before making the tough calls on this sort of thing. Basically saying that Blake often lets himself get forced into making rash decisions because he doesn't make those decisions until he absolutely has to. And then because he has to make those decisions at the last possible second, he has to rush through them, and he doesn't have time to actually, give Rose her chance to talk it out or stuff like that. Fair point, honestly. This is Rose scores a point here in my book.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, Evan is such an obvious example of that. Although that being said, I do remember arcs and arcs ago, us sort of always complaining about how Rose always, again, wants to sit back and plan all these things out, and like she wanted to wait too long to go in, and Blake, there are a few occasions where Blake was sort of like, oh no, we have to go and do this. So again, like I think they're criticizing flaws that they share in each other. These two.
Yeah, I think it is kind of worth keeping in mind though that this whole story we're seeing basically Blake's actions play out, right? Like Rose is kind of backseat driving, but never to the point where she actually really decides what's happening. And I think if we saw this entire story again from Rose's perspective, or if Rose was in the driver's seat and Blake was in the back seat, I suspect Rose would make different decisions that would probably pan out pretty well as well.
Yeah, I agree. They're very similar, but they're not the same. I also love this bit where Rose catches Blake in a bit of a verbal trap by he sort of says he wants to do things more like he did with the hyena while he's trying to explain why he doesn't want to do things like he did with the hyena. And instead of like actually calling him out on it, she just sort of glares at him and like in his internal narration, he's like, she knows that I know like what I've just said. It was so good.
Like, are you fucking kidding me? Look vibes.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just because like Rose gets called out a couple of times this chapter for being conquesty. Now that the sisters dropped that knowledge bomb on us, and to me, this was the bit that really jumped out to me as conquesty. Like just the like so confident she doesn't even need to call him out on it. She just stares at him. It's just like, I know that you
conquest tinged Rose really has no time for bullshit, which I'm very on board with.
Also, the shamanism stuff they talk about here is really cool. I mean, it reminded me of a little bit of some of the discussion question answers we got when we're talking about like creating your own type of practicing. And like, I don't know. I just love this. Just a neat little bit of world building I wanted to call out.
So the Cabal head off to the factory. Basically, we get a bit of a who's here summary where there's all kinds of people here, basically here to help out destroying with or Urkel.
And I want to call out Blake's little preamble to himself before he actually engages with everyone, because he does the sort of same thing again. And he talks about how he sort of feels like a caveman or, like a Stone Age person as part of a tribe going up against like a big beast. I think he uses the word lion specifically, but it really adds to the primal sense of this fight to me. Like, they are going against, literally a demon of the first choir. It's like the opposite of creation. There is no more primal fight than fighting against this sort of demon. And as a metaphor, I think a bunch of tribesmen going up against a lion it's just a solid
definitely
metaphor.
Puts you in the right mindset of like that kind of banding together community scrappy fight for their lives kind of deal.
Yes, and also like a bit of vulnerability, like a lion can kill someone if they're caught alone, and
and
so
Urkel
can
specifically can make someone in a group be caught alone, as we'll see later. I don't know if I'm willing to commit to this being a point yet, but this is the most prepared we've ever seen them, right? Like, this is the most prepared we've ever seen Blake for a fight. They've hired help from all the locals. They've got all kinds of tools and gadgets and stuff. Blake almost never prepares for stuff, and he's never done it to this degree. But obviously, this fails. Like, Blake's flying by the seat of his pants improv usually succeeds for him, where this high level of preparation actually fails. So I'm kind of torn on whether this is intentionally pointing out that Blake just should stick in his lane or if it's just a coincidence, but I like it either way.
Yeah, I think we did actually have a conversation about an arc ago where Blake thought to himself that, he was always out of his element in the improv, and we sort of challenged that assumption he made about himself. And this would sort of align with that. I agree. I don't feel confident in saying this is a message Wildbow was trying to push through, but it could be. Like, I guess we'll see as the story keeps going. It feels it's a neat coincidence, even if it wasn't sort of intentional. I think like it works symbolically. I also the graffiti surrounding the building just sort of hit me the other day. Like, that could have been the Knights, right? Like pre their group shrinking. I'm just going to assume it was the Knights because I'd like to think they achieved something.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, thematically, it kind of fits that they would have, if they had a much bigger group and were more knowledgeable, would have scoped it out, would have set up some of these protections, and then when they, when tragedy struck, they just kind of forgot about it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, whoever did it may have not made it out. So yeah, I don't know. There's probably not much evidence either way because there can't be. So I'm just gonna sort of headcanon it as the Knights because that makes me feel a little bit better about what happened to them, that they did achieve some success.
Yeah. We get a weird moment here between Maggie and Blake that has some uncomfortable sexual tension.
I mean,
right?
there's something.
I don't even know what to call it. It's a moment. All we can call it is a moment.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. I mean, there's been a couple of moments now where I guess I would say Maggie is probably flirting with Blake, or like maybe not even flirting, just sort of putting herself out there. I guess just sort of saying, hey, just letting it be known that she could maybe be interested, which she sort of explicitly states.
What does she
here.
say? I'm finding the quote. She says like, "I like you, Blake. Well, not like you, although I could."
Yeah, I think she basically says, "I'm down if you're down."
She says, "Though I wouldn't mind if you didn't," and then kind of cuts her off, and Blake's just kind of confused.
I imagine he looks somewhat like Tiffany did when Blake first asked her to coffee. That deer in the headlights.
It's a strange moment, but it does feel kind of human to me, right? Like, Elliot, I know you're still on your Maggie equals M equals P kind of theory, but I don't know. This feels like human to me in a way that I don't think it would feel if M was P.
I mean, I guess I did sort of think maybe there were real bits of Maggie that Patrick was using because he does get to walk around saying that he is Maggie. So I don't know. Otherwise, I mean, I don't think there's been much discussion on fairy, romantics and relationships and all that. Maybe this was just all Patrick. Probably not, but. Could be.
So as we said before, we're kind of rounding up everybody that's here to help. We have the Knights who have brought some lights and some trucks and stuff. The Sisters of the Torch are here to lend some fire and doles. And even the shepherd kind of sent some ghosts to help out, which is weird, right? I mean, obviously it's helpful that everyone's kind of banding together, but this ghosts thing is confusing to me because the shepherd, I don't think, wants Blake to succeed. Maybe he does, but he really just wants Blake to die, right? Like, who knows?
Yeah, it caught me a bit off guard. I was like, oh, that's unexpected, especially when they did obey him and seemed to be useful as he went in. I was kind of expecting them to fall short, especially there's one bit where Blake is like, oh, I can't trust a flare. I'd better use a ghost to light a fire there. And I was thinking, I don't know if ghosts are a better, more reliable power source than flares, Blake. But it works out. So yeah, I don't know exactly what was happening here. I guess maybe we'll see. Also, in your list of people who are around, you forgot to mention that Isadora's chilling off to the side with a big tub of popcorn.
Just watching the show.
It's funny because, like, in retrospect, that's such a giant red flag. But it's really well disguised because she's just hidden amongst the descriptions of everyone else who's around. And then Blake's like, oh, I'd better go talk to her. And then sort of by the time he doesn't, I'd forgotten because it was so tense as he's going in. So then on the second read through, I'm like, oh, it's such a red flag.
Course she's here just
it's
to
really
watch
well
it
hidden.
go down.
Yeah, it's really well written.
Yeah, it's it's grim. So Evan and Blake head inside. Everybody kind of gets into position. The plan is for everybody to mostly be supporting from outside. The Cabal is throwing in, like gasoline cans through the window for refuels for Blake, and he's in there kind of lighting shit up, setting a wall of fire, and it seems to be going well to start with. It's intense, but it seems to be, it kind of feels like it felt last time Blake was in here, where it's like, you're on edge, but it's, for the most part, going to be fine.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like, everything's sort of going well, but it's such a high intensity passage, I guess. I think there's like a large gap in my live read comments during this section because I was just, like, my eyes were glued to the page. I couldn't look away. It was great to read. Like, I felt very tense reading it.
So Blake notices that is surrounding him, kind of getting around the fires, and he starts kind of spider webbing out, blocking off exits. Blake throws Evan for a window before it gets blocked, and Blake kind of turns around and sees that through all the smoke from all the fire they're making, this smoke is able to be kind of inhabited by as it's opaque enough to not be in the light.
Yeah. So, like, yeah, I love this moment where sets off the fires to make them bigger is just this real oh shit moment. Yeah, the plan gets completely inverted, and then later we sort of get the reveal as to a big part of the reason presumably did this is because fire makes smoke, and that's great because that smoke is dark, so just sort of gets to fill up way more space.
The smoke kind of is able to surround Blake in a way that by himself with the other fires and lights isn't able to.
And it's such a fantastic, like, this hadn't even occurred to me. And then as soon as the word smoke came up, I was like, oh, fuck. Yeah. Like, that's... and it clearly hadn't sort of occurred to Blake as well. And I love this whole concept as well. Like, again, if fire is creation, one of the side effects of fire is smoke. And I think that's a great analogy for things like So I love this whole reveal. I think, like, symbolically and just as an oh shit moment, it works really well.
So Blake realizes that he's surrounded, but, it's not too big of a deal because there's a bunch of people outside and they will help him out, luckily, until starts to eat Blake's connections. And you kind of get this moment of like, oh fuck, not only am I going to be losing my connections, nobody is going to come to help me. And he kind of has to try and make a break for it, which he does, and he doesn't make it.
Oh man, this moment, like, holy shit. Like, as you said, the first thing that happens is Blake is sort of like, oh, I can just wait here for others to come and help me. And then just eats all of his connections, basically. And you're just like, oh shit. And because, like, that could have been enough, Like, if Blake had still made it out but had no connections to everyone, that still would have been a massive, like, oh, holy shit moment. So I sort of read that, and it's like, as I'm still processing the implications of this already huge moment, it's like only like another 4 lines before Blake gets killed by it. And you're just like, it just like doubles it up. Like, it's a great 1-2 punch. You just sort of, I was still processing what had happened after the first one, and then it just hits you again. You're like, oh my god, like, this is what?
It really catches you off guard, right? This is a great moment. And, when we started doing this podcast, there were a few specific moments that I've been really excited to get up to because they are such, like, pact defining moments.
Sure.
One is meeting Evan, which obviously kind of changes the dynamic of the group in a pretty big way after that point. And this is another one that I was really looking forward to. Blake's death, because it is, foreshadowed even isn't the right word because it's like explicitly told to us. But then actually, oh shit, Blake's actually dead. He's gone.
No, what you said about foreshadowing is exactly what I was thinking. Like, it's not foreshadowing because Walbo has basically explicitly been telling us for at least 2 arcs, Blake is gonna die.
Yeah, soon. Blake is going to die soon.
And yet, like, it still caught me completely off guard. I don't know why. I thought it was going to happen later. And then, sort of thinking on it, it's been really hammered into us, particularly those last 2 arcs. So it was sort of like, well, like, Walbo wasn't going to keep doing that for the next 8 arcs. So I don't know why I thought it was going to take something like that long. But yeah, and I do like this as well because I haven't questioned it at all. Like, I'm assuming Blake is dead. And I think in other stories, I probably would have been like, he's not really dead though, is he? Like, there's not going to be any consequences to this. Whereas this has been so set up that I was just immediately like, oh shit, like, the main character is dead.
Yeah. So it's been a fun podcast, but I guess this is the end.
So managed to get live reads in for those last 2 chapters.
Thanks everyone for listening, and maybe we'll do Twigger next. Well, we'll see what happens next, I suppose. But there is one last little bit in this chapter where we basically see everybody be confused as to what they're doing and just kind of head home. They kind of stop. They think, wait, what's going on? I guess we should just abandon the mission. And they leave. And that's...
Yeah,
that's
I love this little extra bit to the chapter as a way to just really get your mind racing with the implications of what has just happened. And giving us a bit of a tease as to the result of some of those. It's really good. I'm so excited, worried about what's going to happen next.
The 2 final lines of the chapter are that the Cabal is watching a sparrow travel a confused path through the sky, and then Rose settled a hand on Alexis's shoulder. We can't do anything more here. This is very densely heartbreaking writing. So Evan's obviously confused, has no idea what's going on, and is just kind of flying through the sky purposelessly.
I mean, that was the line that crushed me the most.
Yeah.
The confused Sparrow line. I was like, oh god, no, not Evan.
Yeah. Rose touches Alexis's shoulder, which is like, oh fuck, she's clearly that's resolved somehow. Rose is now in the real world. And Alexis is, confused and kind of wants to argue that they shouldn't give up, but can't, and so doesn't. It's rough. It's rough. Elliot, what do you think is going to happen next?
I think you can tell from the script that's in front of you, Ruben, that was a big question, and I've written a lot here. So next up we have an interlude, right? Like next chapter's 7.x, I think. I'm hoping it's going to be Rose, or I kind of assume Rose would be my pick. Maybe Alexis or Tiffany or one of the other Cabal members. But I feel like we're about to get an interlude that's just going to be the aftermath, like expanding on the ending to this chapter, which is obviously Rose has, we already knew Rose was going to kind of settle into Blake's connections. I think Isadora told us that a while ago. And so presumably that's obviously what's just happened, and maybe we'll get some more details on the aftermath of that. Because you got to think, like, it must be confusing for, say, Tiffany, right? Tiffany's only involved in all this because she was keen on Blake, and now she doesn't remember Blake. So surely there's just going to be a moment where Tiffany's sitting there going, how the fuck did I end up here? I mean, way over my head.
I mean, even the fact that Rose is hanging out with Alexis and Tyler and Tiffany is, I think, a point of confusion. Like,
the whole Cabal's going to be like, how do we know each other?
I mean, I know we've known each other for a few weeks now, but how did we meet?
Why did we sign up for this?
What's going on here? You're right. Who knows? I mean, who knows what's going to happen, right?
But I do think it's just going to be a Rose or something interlude. Because I think if you'd asked me, or if you told me in Arc 2 that Blake died at this point in the story, I probably would have guessed that Rose would be the POV character for the second half. But I don't know exactly why, but that just doesn't feel right anymore. Like, I still feel like we're going to be with Blake in the afterlife or something, I guess. And I guess, I'm assuming someone will bring him back. I think my official prediction I made like an arc ago was that Rose will bring him back when he dies. Now I'm thinking it's probably more likely the lawyers, which would be a fun development, watching Blake have to actually owe them something real. Or Isadora or Paige, or the Isadora-Paige combo maybe. Because Isadora seems so aware of this stuff, I'm wondering if she's somehow a little bit immune to the memory loss, or I don't know. Like, she just seemed so... The way she just showed up in this scene was so knowledgeable, has me thinking maybe she's a bit more clued into this stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I'm keen. I hope there is, like, afterlife Blake arcs, because I'd be keen to see what Wildbow could do with the concept of, like, the afterlife or whatever. I think that could be really fun.
It's probably worth pointing out that since our next arc is... our next chapter is an interlude, a histories, it probably won't be, if convention is to be believed, it won't be our point of view for the rest of the story. So we'll probably see what's actually happening when we get to 8.1.
Yeah, but I mean, just as we said, there's so many questions. Like, also, like, the conquest contest is over now, presumably, if Blake's dead. So
I mean, maybe,
is Conquest
right? Who
just,
knows?
Like, is Conquest just going to pop out of the mirror and everyone's going to be a bit confused? Like, what's everyone's recollection of what's happened in the last, like, week is going to be? Like, it's going to be very confusing. Like, what's Conquest going to think about how he ended up in the mirror? Is he going to be blaming Rose?
I mean,
is Rose going to remember
like,
that there's a mirror with Conquest in it in her, like, apartment? I guess it's her apartment now.
But we know that Rose was, going to be slipping into Blake's place when he died, right? And this seems like, I mean, I don't want to make you put your tinfoil hat on or anything, but this is maybe the best possible way for that to happen for Rose. Like, not only is she taking over Blake's life, but people will forget that Blake ever existed.
No, I did think that. This is probably one of the cleanest ways it could happen in terms of, those connections just getting to slot in, because there's nothing to overwrite anymore. Well, I guess maybe that's the thing. If the connections got deleted before Blake, does Rose even fill in the gap? Like, maybe the rest of the Cabal's just going to be like, who dis?
Yeah, true. But there's
also, like, I don't know if written records get deleted? I guess they do, because the Knights didn't know who they lost. Like, I was thinking, like, you know, Blake has left, like, that note for the rest of the descendants and stuff around. Like, so what happens? Do people find it and just not process it or something? I don't know.
There is
so many questions.
There is one piece of good news, though, that is, wherever Blake is, he presumably has his phone back, so that's good.
I'm just imagining, like, before, like, the Grim Reaper or something comes to collect him, if he's just sort of like a spirit or a ghost in the factory, and he just sort of sees the ghost of his phone on the ground next to him. He's like, oh yeah,
that's where I left it. Yeah. This is a chapter that ends on such a cliffhanger that it's kind of like, what even the fuck is gonna happen next? Like, it's so imaginable.
Well, I think I just talked for 5 minutes about all the questions I have about what might happen next, and I probably barely scratched the surface. Like, the more I think about it, the more I'm going to be like, well, what the hell's Maggie going to think just happened? Like, there's so much. Yeah.
I guess we'll see. TM. But yeah. There's nothing I can really say here that isn't just waiting to see what happens next. But I guess that's the end of our discussion on Void 7.11, except I almost forgot the answers to our discussion question. So for those of you who don't remember, we did a discussion question 2 chapters ago, which was if you were going to be the pet of an other or a god or something, what would you pick and what would the drawbacks be? And we got a bunch of interesting answers to this across our 2 previous discussion threads. All kinds of cool stuff.
We did. Like, one of the first ones I came across was by Groby46578, who brought up Chiron, who's a centaur from Greek mythology. Yep. So Chiron is the one who trained, like, Hercules and Jason, like the Jason with the Argonauts, and Achilles, and I should have looked this up. I think Achilles is like Chiron's grandson or something as well. It's been a while. Anyway, basically Chiron is just, you know, presumably a pretty kick-ass teacher if this is his, like, you know, alumni list. So Groby46578 thinks that he'd be a good teacher, but probably pretty picky about his students. So it's like, if you can get him to take you on, it's probably worth it, but it's probably easier said than done.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess it comes back to the idea of Isadora being a pretty good choice, all things considered.
Yeah. Well, so one of the interesting things, I think I forgot to mention this in the 7.9, but obviously we know Isadora kills her students who are doing badly. Yeah. And one of the things Isadora said to Paige in 7.9 was, you know, if we're lucky, someone else will take responsibility for introducing you to the world. And I wonder, like, it got me thinking, maybe a huge part of the reason Isadora kills students who sort of stuff up even a little is because she doesn't, like, want the responsibility.
Yeah, true.
Like, that's, it's sort of partially her, you know, balancing karma thing, but also just, if a student doesn't seem like they're going to be a real good person to have responsibility for, just sort of cutting them out. So I wonder if, like, if Paige had been sort of made aware of the world by someone else, I wonder if that means Isadora's less harsh on her. Anyway, sorry, that's a little aside.
No, it's an interesting point. I imagine that there's potentially a way... I mean, presumably there's a reason that Isadora, you know, trains up fresh meat, to put it bluntly, as opposed to getting somebody who's already been awakened but is a kind of relatively junior practitioner and taking them under her wing. You know, like a young Behaim or a young Duchamp, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, there must be some reason. Anyway, the other thing I liked about Groby's answer, to get back to the question for a bit, is Groby also talks about Fae and goblins, which are, I think Groby kind of puts it as there's high risk, high reward there. But I think it's high risk, low reward, honestly. I feel like those two would be not the kinds of things you want to be a pet or familiar of.
I think depending on the right fairy or goblin, it's potentially high reward. But, you know, we're talking... I think there's a lot more high risk than there is high reward.
Yeah.
Like, proportionally, it's... I think there's a reason we haven't heard about anyone doing this in Pact. It seems very risky.
I can't think of a single goblin that we've heard of in the story that would be that would even be like the better choice of the goblins, right?
Yeah.
Unless you're just picking based on name, you know? In which case it's Dick Swizzle, of course.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I can't think of a goblin that isn't horrific, and I kind of think maybe they're horrific by definition.
Yes, I suspect.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about an answer by a user called Stuck in Reddit Factory, which I really liked. They basically talk about how it's basically always a bad idea. They point out that any other that wants a pet, there's probably a bad reason behind that. And so you probably don't want to. Any other that would take you as a pet, you're probably in a bad position already off the bat.
Well, I think one of the things Stuck in Reddit Factory mentions is at the very least, you're going to have to give up some of your autonomy and presumably some of your like morals.
Yeah, for sure.
In this
for
role,
sure.
like there's almost no chance that you're just going to get. This is never going to be like a dream job.
It's never going to be a friendly, cool other.
Yeah.
But Stuck in Reddit Factory does pick one, and they pick an interesting one, in my opinion. Blue dragons from D&D, right? Which are kind of the lawful evil dragons, which means they kind of follow rules that they have set up for themselves, but on the whole, they'll do heinous shit for their own benefit, right? So yes, they'll have you do some evil stuff, but Stuck in Reddit Factory points out that they're most likely to have you as a pet as like a status symbol, which is a pretty good position to be in because they're gonna treat you nicely, at least when you're around other people, and they're gonna not treat you too badly because it will mean that it's not a very good status symbol if you've got like an ugly or a kind of dirty pet.
Well,
right?
if you look strong, it makes them look
Exactly.
stronger. I think was sort of the point. Yeah, it's you set yourself up in a way that you're more useful to them in a better state.
Which is a very clever setup by Stuck in Reddit Factory.
Yeah,
a good answer.
I also wanted to bring up Brawl97 commented, and I really like the way Brawl97 looked at this like choosing a job, which I just thought was a really interesting approach. I think Brawl97 said it's just like picking a job, but obviously one with super high stakes and it's permanent. But they talked a lot about, you want to look into how it'll affect your life and like, will you still have free time and like, what impact will it have on your life outside of the practice? Because, we do know that quite a few practitioners still have, like day lives, civilian identities.
But not many practitioners are, the familiars themselves, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. But I think, so Brawl97 eventually went with Mnemosyne, who's one of the Greek titans, and she's associated with like memories, and I think one of Brawl97's hopes was because she's not like a super high tier member of the Greek pantheon, that like hopefully she's not a complete dick. So yeah, I don't know. I just really like that approach of coming at it from that angle.
Yeah, I mean, I guess picking someone who's lower power means there's probably a lot less pressure on it, but lower power means there's less benefit to it as well.
I guess this is sort of the dilemma Blake has been facing with all of his choices for the big three.
Yeah, true. The next answer that I want to pull out that I really liked is by a user called Code Zeta. They wrote this huge post that was talking a lot about Afro-Brazilian religions, two religions specifically, and we didn't get the name, so I haven't got them here. But
I wasn't confident in being able to pronounce them, honestly.
Take a look in the 7.10 thread though, because it's very interesting. But kind of the cool part about it to me was that in communities that are practicing in this religion, they have a kind of a spiritual elder who kind of acts as a familial or a pet kind of relationship between these kind of powerful spirits already. And so there's a lot of this kind of familial relationship that already kind of exists. And based off of that, Code Zeta is able to talk about some of these potential others and which ones would be useful for which specific purposes, which I found very interesting. It's a great
so in the show notes for this episode, we should have a link to Kayakan's list of all the previous threads, so you can find the 7.10 thread in there, and I'd recommend just going and reading this, because we're drastically summarizing some of the information Code Zeta wrote about these religions, and I'd never heard of either of these. I found this fascinating to learn about.
Yeah, it was. That's how it always goes with this stuff, right? Like whenever we ask a discussion question, people pull out these completely mind-blowing and very like deep areas of history or culture that we just have no idea about. It's always fun to read
Yeah,
about.
like even just the origins of these two Afro-Brazilian religions, like how they're sort of hybrids of some traditional African religions with like bits of Catholicism and other bits and pieces mixed in. It's super interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's everything.
Cool. Well, that's the end of our discussion of Void 7.11. Void. It makes sense now.
Oh my god, yeah, it just hit me.
We'll do more.
I hadn't considered that until now.
We'll do the overall chapter discussion after the next chapter, I suppose, and we'll be able to go back through and examine it a bit more. Anyway, if you've enjoyed the show, check out our discussion threads where you can talk more about this chapter or the show in general, or just any of the cool packed stuff that you want to talk about. That will be linked in the episode description thingy down below in your podcatcher.
You can also find us on Twitter, which is at MediaMD Podcast. As we've already mentioned, there's live reads going on there now, but we're also, checking that Twitter, so it's another way to get in touch with us.
If you want to find out more about the show or any of the other great shows on the Doof Media Network, then head to the website, which is doofmedia.com.
And Doof Media is supported by our patrons. So if you head over to patreon.com/doofmedia, there's a bunch of great perks for you if you become a patron.
And you only.
And it also helps us.
Yes, it's very helpful. Beyond just the fact that you're supporting us to make more of this podcast, you will also get access to the Doof Discord, which is a great place to go and chat about Wildbow Works or just share Mario Maker levels, which is what I've been using it for mostly these days.
There's a good little group of Mario Makers in there, and we're all sharing levels. It's really good. Wildbow also has a Patreon, while we're on it, patreon.com/Wildbow.
Yes, so definitely go and support Wildbow too, because of course he has made this incredible story that we're just riding on the coattails of, I suppose. And that's all for us this episode. Our next episode, 7.x, will be coming out on Friday the 5th of July, so we will see you then.
See ya.